Welcome to the Interzone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Internet. I'm your host, Mark Cashman, here with my co-host today. That's two people, Chris McNulty and Bill Baer.
We'll also be joined by Ben Stegink from Intelligink and the Cloud IT Pro podcast.
Before we get started, I'd love to hear what your insights were at Ignite. What was your kind of full breadth of the whole event? We're now past it, and you're going to hear when we talk with Ben that we actually talked with him at Ignite. But round out what your Ignite experience was. First, Chris.
If you go to the website, you can see the sessions that we did, and it's great to be able to connect with people at sessions. I have to say the biggest takeaways I got were being able to talk to folks at the booth and being able to meet customers in one-on-one sessions, because it reminded me of the way we were with the cloud decisions 5 years ago. Should we go to the cloud or not? There were two trends that I really saw. First, there is, in SharePoint land, a huge classic modern split. And are we ready to move to modern yet or not? That definitely was a huge theme that kept coming up over and over and over again. And in the areas that I cover, business apps and in particular, all the new hotness is over in modern. So it's usually a pretty easy discussion there. And relative to today's topic, there was a lot of interest and enthusiasm around SharePoint 19. SharePoint 2019 is paying forward an awful lot of the modernization experiences from 3 years ago. And I got a sense of a level of excitement about it as a release that, frankly, we didn't see 3 years ago with SharePoint 2016.
Yeah, I think that move to modern, I think a lot of people maybe haven't quite turned that crank in their mind that will actually be an on-premises experience as well. So, Bill, let's turn to you and get your insights on Ignite. Certainly you cover server, you think about modern, but I think you think about a whole bunch of stuff, and I bet a whole bunch of stuff came your way at Ignite. What was your takeaway at Ignite?
Takeaway number one, it was really, really hot. But that aside, Ignite was an exciting event, and our SharePoint community really turned out in force at this event. With 50 sessions, 3 pre-conference workshops, and a general session led by Jeff Teeper, we were able to cover a lot of ground at Ignite. We had a ton of fans of SharePoint and OneDrive there, obviously our customers and partners, and probably the biggest takeaways is, as Chris mentioned, we're really seeing a lot of enthusiasm around moving to modern, and I think we're starting to paint a really good picture of where it fits in an overall information architecture and some of the investments we're making across hub sites and communication sites, and even modern team sites. And then obviously in the areas I focus on, with security and compliance, we had a ton of great announcements, and we're really driving further and helping people understand how to better secure their content, as well as ensure that they're compliant with corporate and governmental regulatory requirements. So we're making a ton of progress there. And then lastly, the other thing that I focus on is mixed reality and artificial intelligence really came through at Microsoft Ignite. And we had a ton of interest in the work that we're continuing to do with SharePoint Spaces. So overall, I think we covered a lot of ground, and we really showed some of the investments that we're making to make your life easier with SharePoint and OneDrive.
It sounds like you were busy.
I think we were
Absolutely.
I think we were all busy. Mark, what was your takeaway from Ignite?
Yeah, I may not have been completely as busy as you both, but I had kind of 2 vectors plus one that I just added that was just fun. The first one was just as you've been speaking about modern. My area is the modern intranet. And we came, to the show with a bigger motion that we want people to think about building their modern intranet on SharePoint in Office 365. And that's a process, and there's a lot of things that people don't know. There's a lot of things that we're working on that are coming soon that will make that viable. So a lot of it was just addressing the questions, promoting, obviously, all the announcements that get people a little bit more comfortable with the art of the possible versus what they knew on premises. The second thing was just teams. And one of the stints that I had at our booth, I actually felt like I got a practice run for then the session that I had with Jeremy Masner later in the week that was all about how do teams, the capital T, and team sites work together. But at the booth, I actually had about 5 different people who were just generally interested in what we're doing with team sites. But the first person asked a question around Microsoft Teams. How do I do this in Microsoft Teams? But it was really a SharePoint question. So I answered that and moved to the next question as it does at a booth. And by the end, I really felt like I had a really great practice run for my Friday session, which was really fun to do it in the booth style when you sort of are a little bit more close encounters with real folks asking real questions. The third one was, though, I did it to myself, and I was just trying to chase Bill in the amount of giveaways that he was doing. online. Bill, you had certainly higher priced and more fun giveaways. My giveaway that I brought in quantity were SharePoint socks. So my activities at Ignite were rounded off by hashtag SP socks. And that was kind of fun.
Well, our giveaway was blankets for content services because in 95-degree humidity, what do you need more than blankets? But it's interesting. If you looked at the two expo halls, one is newer, one is older. One is modern, one is classic.
Ooh.
And the modern one has better air conditioning.
Ooh, had we migrated to the modern air-conditioned one?
Well, we were still in classic.
Oh, boy.
But the truth is, by next year, Ignite 2019, next November, the weather won't matter so much. So hopefully we won't even be debating classic or modern expo halls in 2019.
That's really great. Bill, we know that certainly one of your biggest focuses, both in your career and what you now do for all of the folks in the community and, of course, to our customers, is you're looking to help clarify and empower the SharePoint Online admin, which we really now focus on a couple of things. The first thing I want to hear from you is, some of the announcements that we made, but also some of the innovations we're making for the SharePoint Admin Center in Office 365. When somebody is now a cloud admin, and they are human too, what are some of the things that we're enabling them to do at that level?
Yeah, well, one of the first things that we did a little over a year ago is we really started doubling down on refreshing the SharePoint Admin Center and making it more coherent for people to use. So instead of the Chaucer-like settings page that we had, we really reduced that down and distilled it into core groups of functionality to help people better rationalize some of the settings that they can make in SharePoint Online. But even outside of that, what we did is we started to borrow from our modern principles that we've applied to modern team sites and lists and libraries and brought those into the admin experience as well. So you've got this really great familiar list view from a sites management perspective. Some of the things that we announced at Ignite that we're going to start rolling out here towards the end of the month is we've added better hub site management capabilities. So now you can both create hub sites inside of the SharePoint Admin Center. You can promote an existing site to a hub site, and you can also associate existing sites with a hub site, all directly through the Admin Center. Some of the other cool stuff that we're doing is you can make it your default admin center now, the new SharePoint Admin Center. So if it's something that you're really excited about, you can definitely make it your default admin center. So that's going to help people that want to start using that and immersing themselves in it.
So can we talk a little bit about the ease of use features? Because you were mentioning, I love throwing a Canterbury Tales reference in, but IT pros in SharePoint for a long time have had to master a really esoteric set of commands and screens to be able to run SharePoint for their customers. We've moved it up to the cloud. Microsoft is taking care of more of the care and feeding of SharePoint, and we're making it easier and easier and easier for people to get into the admin console and use the modern experiences there. What does an IT pro do moving forward with the way that we're thinking about administration in the cloud?
Yeah, I think some of the things that we've done is really the admin center is getting more and more powerful. One of the other things we're introducing as well is the ability to start specifying some default configurations for sites. So kind of global configurations, establishing a preset time zone, a site creation path, the ability to specify a managed path. So we're driving more and more parity between what you used to do on premises from an administrator to what you can do in the cloud and as administrator. Now, obviously, the one thing that you won't be able to do, which has been typical of SharePoint Online administration since its inception, is really managing the service itself. So in the past, as an administrator, you're responsible for both managing how users would interact with SharePoint as well as the environment that they interacted in. And now we've kind of taken over the management of the environment itself, obviously, as a service, but really we're bringing more and more parity to kind of the sites management experience. Those day-to-day management opportunities that you had on premises will start to exist in the cloud as well. And as I mentioned, some of those things, the ability to specify a managed path, the ability to start configuring preset options for how sites are created. So effectively establishing a consistent configuration. And then one of the real exciting things that we're bringing to the admin center is the ability to use a security group as the site collection administrator. And I know it sounds relatively minor on the surface, but that's a huge investment that's going to help a lot of people, because now you don't have to worry about what if this individual leaves the company, or what if their alias changes, or what if their account becomes disabled or inadvertently deleted for any given reason by an identity administrator. Now you can actually have security groups be the basis of what the site collection administrator is. And then over the
I think security, just to pivot off of that, one of the things that I loved is the fact that we now are bringing the sensitivity labels into the admin center as well.
Yeah, and that's actually really cool. And you can also, in addition to bringing the sensitivity levels to the labels to the admin center as well, we're also enabling you to be able to set those and create views based upon those through the admin center. So really giving you a lot of power.
Can you tell our audience what sensitivity labels do for those of you who may not have been at Ignite?
Yeah, if I were to kind of summarize it very briefly, imagine that you have, as most organizations do, a number of different SharePoint sites. Each one of those sites probably has content that has some specific level of sensitivity associated with it. So perhaps you might have a legal site and a marketing site. And the legal site and perhaps maybe a human resources site might contain PII or other confidential information. So now what you can do is you can actually create labels. Those labels can have policies associated with them, and policies can dictate how the content is accessed and by whom and across which devices, how it should be treated. So effectively establishing some levels of classification. You can then take those classification labels and associate them with a site, and then the content within that site inherits that policy. So basically, you can create specific classification policies for your legal site and your HR site, and a different set of policy for your less confidential site, such as your marketing site.
I think what you and Chris have been talking about is a lot of what people can do in the service. I think another area that you own that we made a lot of announcements, and I've seen actually a lot of traction of interest and people using it, is the SharePoint migration tool. And, maybe at first glance, when we first launched it a number of months ago, it was focused on just content. Moving content from A to B, and we had a couple of good source and destination options. But can you get us up to speed on where the migration tool is now, and maybe even a pointer of where people can go to get it to try it themselves?
Yeah, so throughout the course of the intro zone, we've kind of talked a lot about the benefits of SharePoint, the benefits of the cloud, the benefits of OneDrive for Business and Microsoft Teams, and now we're making it easier than ever to get there. So what we delivered is a SharePoint migration tool. It's a free migration tool that you can freely download from aka.ms/SP as in SharePoint, MT as in migration tool. Once you have the migration tool, you can effectively do your own self-service migrations. Initially, we focused, as you mentioned, on content. So we are really file-centric, helping you get files from file shares, from SharePoint team sites on premises, as well as OneDrive for Business on premises, into SharePoint Online. Over the course of time, we invested in adding the option to migrate lists as well. So now you can migrate both document libraries as well as lists to OneDrive and SharePoint Online, including Microsoft Teams. And at Ignite, we announced that in January, we're also going to add the ability to perform full site migrations. So now you can point the SharePoint migration tool at a SharePoint site, and you can migrate that site, inclusive of all of its content and subsites, to SharePoint Online in 3 simple clicks. So it's really easy, it's really fast, and best of all, it's free.
I'll tell you, when I saw Navjot demo that for the first time, that's Navjot Verk, who is focused as the GPM in this area on the engineering side. That was one of the things where I really was one of those moments where I thought, gosh, I hadn't seen that before. And is that real? I was thinking these have to be JPEG click-throughs. But really doing the work of the SharePoint migration tool in the browser, very easy to do in terms of setup and then to establish the connection, and then, of course, to let it do its thing.
One of the things that's also seems like magic, and it also seems obvious, is that the admin center can now show you all of your sites instead of just some of your sites. And it's things like that and things like administration, Bill. I think, one thing I find myself saying to the IT pro is that you're not going to get any more hours in the day, so we're taking care of some of the grunt work and drudgery so that you can focus on some of the more high-value integrations and services that you can bring to your customers.
Yeah, I think some of the experiences that we're delivering from an admin, even from a security perspective, is really enabling the systems administrator to become the value added service broker inside of the organization. So you're really getting away from that classic sysadmin type experience of patching servers and installing updates to really driving value inside of your organization through the ability to not only manage sites as well as their classification, but really establish consistent information architecture, supporting your users and accelerating their success with SharePoint and OneDrive in Office 365. So again, it's really that transition, again, from being an admin to being more value add to the organization. And we're doing a lot of that through some of the investments that we're making in the admin center, as well as through some of the investments that we're making in the security and compliance side. So really empowering you to empower your users.
And that is exactly what we are going to be checking in with Ben Stegink, all about moving from that classic IT pro of SharePoint and beyond into what it means to that value add to the business as a cloud admin. And of course, mixing the two in terms of if people are in a hybrid state. So Bill, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be in the zone with Mark and Chris in the intrazone.
Today, we're joined by a special guest, Ben Stegink, and you are flying in all the way from, well, no, you've just been here the whole time.
Yeah, I drive. Well, I just drive back and forth. I'm just a couple hours away.
This is pretty close to you. So how is it nice to have Ignite in your backyard?
It is.
Or did you put it in the front yard?
Probably more the backyard than the front yard.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's nice. My wife appreciates it. I know we were talking before. I've got a bunch of young kids at home.
Yeah.
So she likes it being really close because I can drive back and forth and spend the night at home and help with kids and come down and enjoy the conference during the day.
I think the little joke between everybody here is what's your step count at the end of the day? I think maybe for you is what's your mile count?
So yeah, I need to put something out because it's like I walk like 5 or 6 miles a day in the 5 hours I'm here. And then I drive 2.5 hours back.
What's Ben all about?
What has Ben all about? So first, congratulations on getting my name right. I know I prompted you with that, but you would not believe how many people I tell and they still get it wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is.
Ben.
Ben.
The clue that you gave us was it's like Stegosaurus.
Yes.
Stegink.
Yes,
So
it is Stegink.
I just got dinosaurs and Ben in my mind.
Yeah, so I am. I'm here in Jacksonville. I actually work for myself. I have my own company, Intelligink, that is just me. Do independent consulting, SharePoint, Office 365 on the IT pro side of things. Mm-hmm. I don't like code, so I try to avoid it.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that for had my own company for 6 years. I've been working with SharePoint for, I think it's been about 12 years now. I start losing track.
Yeah.
So then, like you said, I have a podcast with me and Scott Hogue do a podcast, the Microsoft Cloud IT Pro podcast, where we talk about Office 365 Azure from the standpoint of IT pros.
And I can tell you that we're still relatively new to the podcast space. And one of the ways that we can show that is Chris and I have done 2 shows since we've been here, this one included. How many have you done since you've been in MS Ignite?
So I cannot say that I can't take credit for all of them because I've been driving back and forth.
You're a man of one. Take credit.
Yeah, okay. Scott's going to listen to it. Well,
Scott's
going to listen to it. He's like, I did all those interviews. No, Scott and I are up to, we had 10 as of yesterday, and I know we did 2 more this morning.
In a week?
Yeah, and I think we have 3 more.
Don't get ideas, Mark.
Oh, no ideas from that. I think we have a nice manageable amount, but when I saw you, I think you put out a tweet of the list of the numbers and all that stuff. And
I think we're going to be up to 15 recorded episodes during this week.
I also just want to showcase a little bit of my ignorance on the name of your company. I'm just realizing half of your last name is the last half of your company. Intelligink?
Yes.
Edgink?
You got it. My wife.
Thank you. 2 points for Mark.
How long after you started the company did you realize that the name? I'm sorry. What a coincidence.
My wife actually came up with it. I can't even take credit for my own company name. That was my wife.
Nice.
I spent like 2 hours with a friend trying to come up with it. And she walks in and she's like, we need to go home. Just call it Intelligink. And I was like, ooh, I like that. Okay.
Yeah. So you've been busy with the podcast. Just give us a little richer experience of what Ben's been doing racing around Microsoft Ignite.
So it really has been just recording podcasts. I won't lie. I have been to 2 sessions.
So they must have been important ones.
They were the Vision keynote.
Yeah.
And then they were I can't even remember what the modern desktop Office 365 keynote was right after it.
Yeah.
So I sat through those two, and then I've just been racing around doing interviews because blog posts, I'm like, I can catch up on sessions, on blog posts, and all of that to get most of the news. I watched the session Jeff Teeper did on SharePoint.
It's now available for on demand. We'll
Yes.
put a link in the show note, including other stuff that maybe we reference. From the Vision keynote down to Jeff's session that you now have seen, quick highlights of things that you thought resonated really well with what you do, or you knew that people that you support and work with that they're going to really like.
So mine, as you guys can see, nobody else can, I'm on a Mac. Files on demand for the Mac I like that. I turned it on the other night. I've been playing with that. So that was kind of me, just a little nerdy one for me. Other ones, I'm trying to think of what, I had one of my clients that really liked the records management stuff you guys were talking about all the file plans and those announcements around that. And then the new admin center. It's exciting to see the new SharePoint admin center keep going. I know we talked a little bit about that. Bill had a session on that wasn't available on demand quite yet. So I need to catch up on that one.
Let's kind of complete the journey, though.
Yeah.
Mark, what are some of your quick highlights?
So on day 4, I started a lighter role on day 0, just supporting the Jeff Teeper general session, getting it ready. Anything that anybody needed, I was sort of all hands on deck or no hands on deck, depending on how they were doing it. But then moving into day 1, I was a little bit more on the social team that day. Day 2, getting into a session with Sue Hanley, where we talked about intranets and how to really think about it before you build anything, vision strategy. Today has been a little bit of a crazy day. A couple of podcasts that one obviously we're doing here, but I did a few things in the central area just to our left here, which is the community center, and got to sit down and talk with Tracy Vanderschiff. She did a little video. I also was on a show with Martin Eccles, and they started in Dutch. So I did my best Dutch, which is the word stroopwafel. And then I was out, and then the rest of it was in English.
Yeah, mine doesn't go much beyond that either.
And I thought I knew how to say apple juice, but instead I was saying orange juice. Sina apple sap.
Better you than me.
So
I'll stick to sports.
Yeah.
You're doing better than me. My background is Dutch, and I don't speak any Dutch.
Okay, well, maybe we can learn Dutch together. At SPC 19, we'll have a Dutch podcast.
All right.
So, Ben, one thing I'm not sure if, it's great to hear that you were at the Modern Workplace keynote. I was backstage, and we put a lot of work into those things. We hope they landed well, and we'll talk about them elsewhere. But what I love about being backstage at our Tier 1 keynotes is it, for a IT pro geek like me, it's like wandering around mission control. It's truly there are hundreds and hundreds of systems and servers and probably 100 people all staring over monitors and keys, supporting everything backstage. It's like a massive infusion of hardcore tech just to make sure that everything is there with redundant backup and redundant networking. It's really, really cool, and we should probably show that sometime.
Oh, yeah.
The other quick side note I will mention is there was a moment in that keynote, remember, where we cut to a junior aircraft technician named Brad Anderson?
Yes.
We had a fake tarmac set built behind the scenes.
Wow.
Did you really?
Yeah, with people walking around, and people said, is that a green screen? Like, no, we actually had a little mini.
So we're going to put a quarter in the Wayback Machine to start really the meat of this podcast, which, if we stick with our working title, is Cloud Admins Are Human Too. But to get to where we are today, we got to understand where we came from. And then we're going to hopefully talk about some of the dichotomy and dilemma in between for people that have been doing it for a while and some people who've maybe just gotten started. So if we go back in time, and Ben, from your perspective, paint us a picture. What does a IT pro, whether it's just SharePoint or SharePoint OneDrive, anything collaborative, setting it up for the company, what is their role? What do they do every day?
Every day. So if we go way back, like when I first got started, it was SharePoint 2003. And it was a lot of the server management, the database management, managing SharePoint itself. So I got my start in SharePoint as a system admin. Started working as a system admin. The company had SharePoint, and they're like, hey, guess what? As a system admin, you get SharePoint, because it was the database servers, it was the Active Directory servers, it was the SharePoint servers, it was IIS, it was all of those. So as I got started, 2003, 2007, all the way through them, it still tended to be a lot of the same type of work, whether it was monitoring SQL databases, making sure they didn't get above 150 gigs, 200 gigs, 250 gigs, watching the CPU, the memory, the available drive space. You get into the SharePoint side of things, and it was managing service applications. It was managing the web applications, IIS. Start getting into 2013, 2016, you get the workflow manager, you get Office web apps that come into play. It's how all of those work together. I just found out the other day, certificates expire after 5 years in the workflow manager, which if you do the math.
Did you set them up 5 years ago?
I did. So I set it up 5 years ago, but it was on a SharePoint 2013 farm. Guess when 2013 came out?
Earlier than that. Wow.
Yeah, a little bit over 5 years ago, and all the
yeah.
certificates expired the other day, so I had to go fix those. So it's that type of stuff. It's dealing with, there's certain aspects to SharePoint that obviously make it unique and prevent some unique administrative experiences, administrative knowledge when you talk about the on-prem versions of SharePoint going back several years. But there's a lot of stuff that it's just normal system admin because it's IIS, it's servers, it's SQL, it's just server management type tasks, patching, updates, security.
So I'm going to enter in a little territory that I know almost nothing about, comparatively, obviously, with you, Chris, and if our friend Bill Baer was here, who is our kind of expert in this area. But think about central administration.
Yes.
And think about tasks that you would do with PowerShell, not the easy ones, like real solid PowerShell usage. Just describe maybe a couple of things that you would do routinely when you would go into central admin, and the only little caveat is think about the things that maybe people don't do in the cloud, just because we'll get there in comparison.
So the biggest thing, the one primary one I did with PowerShell that you actually couldn't even do with the GUI was that initial setup and configuration, especially if you didn't want a bunch of crazy GUIDs in your database names. I like my SQL servers to all be named, have the databases have the same prefix. I don't want any crazy strings in there because when I need to go do something later with PowerShell, I want to be able to actually type the database names and not have to go look them up or have at least a general idea of what it is. So I had a bunch of scripts to go through and just help with that configuration, the initial setup of SharePoint to give nice, friendly names to all those databases. It also helped with consistency. If you're doing a multi-server farm, being able to run the same scripts on different servers, run the same scripts for dev and test and prod, so that those would all be similar across all the servers. One of the big ones I used PowerShell for a lot.
But remember, what's the most important thing to do with naming your SQL servers?
With naming my SQL servers? Oh, you're going to catch me off.
Aliases.
Aliases, yes. That is. You set me up perfectly, and I should have nailed that one.
Maybe we can take it
aliases.
again and go. Next question. No, we're not going to let you.
We could do it again and edit it out, but
aliases. See, it wasn't PowerShell. I was still thinking PowerShell, SQL Server naming, but yes, those aliases.
But the thing is, I much like yourself, I came up, and I've been working with SharePoint for almost 20 years, and I spent an awful lot of my first 10 years as a customer and consultant. And so much of what that really was about then was mostly SQL administration. 80% of SharePoint on-premises problems are actually SQL problems.
Yep.
And how do you optimize performance of SharePoint is really how do I optimize SQL?
Yeah. There were unique challenges to even that because I would go into certain SQL admins, DBAs, and they would want to optimize SharePoint databases for how they were used to optimizing SQL databases.
Right.
And you're like, no, don't touch that. Don't write to the databases. Don't modify anything in those databases. SQL had its own unique set of database challenges, administration tweaks that you were allowed to do, and some you were like, no, don't do that.
Right. I mean, SharePoint delivers its own query hints and indexes in a pre-optimized manner. So the person who just cracks their knuckles and says, I'm going to fix what Microsoft broke here is usually in for an unpleasant surprise.
Yes.
Or the IT pro who comes in to fix it is in for an even more unpleasant surprise.
You guys keep saying SQL, and I keep thinking like SharePoint the movie. There's a sequel coming out. Like, okay, you're over my head. So I may be a little out of the conversation. That's a good thing. Honestly, from a SQL perspective, I remember way back when Ignite just became Ignite. The biggest value that people told us about was I go to the SharePoint booth and I'm asking questions, and they know there's dependencies on SQL, but I have a deep SQL question, and not every SharePoint person can answer a SQL question. And then at Ignite, the nice thing was you could point over and say, go talk to them over there at the SQL booth. SharePoint conferences didn't commonly have the SQL experts, but that's not to say that people like yourselves don't know SQL very well. But I think the nice thing here now in this cloud world that is obviously connecting on-premises to online, there's that same value. You still can go pretty deep on premises. We're still releasing servers. People are still going into hybrid mode and doing lots of things that require lots of IT pro expertise and coordination across the business. But let's go a little bit into the cloud admin. I think a common question that at least I know Chris and I hear, I bet you hear it a lot in your podcast role, but I'm an IT pro and the world is changing around me. My company wants me to move to the cloud, move our business to the cloud. What's left for me? Is my role going away? Does my role evolve? How do I evolve? What do I need to think about? So that's really what we wanted to center on, that sort of what might be a FOMO, fear of missing out, or FOMO, fear of missing out on the cloud. What does that mean for an IT pro that's been doing it for a while? And then kind of a cheat, if you want to go right into it, is what does it mean for somebody who's just signing up today, whether that's because they're younger in age and haven't been doing IT and this is just how it is now, or maybe somebody who is just changing roles and getting into it?
Yeah, so as you're going to the cloud, your boss wants you to go to the cloud, you as an IT pro, what do? Honestly, like me, I relish it. I love it. Kind of like what we had talked about. When it was on-prem, you had your own unique set of challenges. I can't tell you how many all-nighters I pulled because I had to install cumulative updates. Mm-hmm. Or how many times I got called because a hard drive filled up or a database ran out of space and we had to quick expand hard drives or move databases around. When you start going to the cloud, all of that goes away. To Microsoft's, you guys get to handle all of it now. I'm like, hey, you guys go do the databases and the servers and the patching and all of that.
No. We don't. Zach, if you see the prior podcast, Zach does.
Yeah, we did a podcast all about data centers, from the data center footprint, the physical buildings, all the way through to getting all the capacity of the servers, and then, of course, the service itself, our service, SharePoint.
I listened to that. I was super jealous. When you talk about the backstage stuff in those data center tours, I'm like, oh, I want to be there.
It was big. And we were just in the lab, the lab one. It's a full-size data center, but it's not as big as the biggest one.
And you have never seen a spinning hamster wheel as big as the one that powers Office 365.
Oh, yeah. But the sounds were great. That was fun, just being in the space and just stopping for a second and listening to the hum of big-scale data, electricity, and networking.
Yeah. So going back to the administrator, take advantage of not having to do all of that. To really, it is going to be an evolution of some of your skills because, like I said, you're not going to have to do the patching. You're not going to have to manage those dev and test farms. But there's a certain level of expertise that is going to transition very easily from on-prem to the cloud. Security hasn't changed. You still have users. You still have security groups. Now you have more types of groups because you have security groups. You have Office 365 groups. You're still managing all of those permissions within your SharePoint sites. You still have your site collections that you have to administer. There's still space constraints. Well, I'm sure everybody would love SharePoint storage and Office 365 to be unlimited. You still do have limitations on space that you have to monitor, you have to watch. You at least have the option to purchase more storage if you need it. I did have one client that had that. They went to do an Office 365 migration. It was something with the versioning or the way the storage was calculated. They actually ran out of space in their SharePoint Online environment when they migrated all of their content from file shares into SharePoint Online.
No, I would hope that wasn't recently.
That was not with the recent change.
Yeah.
It was before, yes.
Okay. For folks who don't know, during the summer, we expanded the amount of baseline capacity we give every customer by about 20 times. Yep. So if you started, it used to get 6 terabytes for a typical 10,000 seat organization, you now get 101 terabytes.
Yeah, and to be also real frank, it is something that they track very closely. You will have the one-offs that maybe do something that we didn't expect, but commonly that's never the case. We're always way ahead of what the expectations of use is going to be versus perception.
Yep. Well, so in theirs, it was just their tenant because they were allocated like 1.1 terabytes or something. It was a small company that was migrating about a terabyte of content up. And it was right before you increased that storage.
Yep.
We had an intelligent AI service running in the background that knew that they were going to do that, and we were just a step ahead of them.
Well, we also have intelligent service people who do look at that and try to forecast what capacity demands are going to be.
Humans are still working?
Humans are still people too.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
nicely done.
Imagine that.
But let me kind of expand on what Mark was asking you. So you talked a little bit about if you look at the last 20 years and the next 20 years, there's definitely some skills that people have honed in the last 20 years that you carry forward and are still relevant for the cloud admin.
Yep.
What else do you need to, it's hard to project exactly what the cloud will look like in 20 years with perfect fidelity, but we know some of the things. What do you think are some of the most important things for an IT pro to pay attention to now to keep them relevant in the cloud future?
So this is one that's been around the technology has been around for a while. I think PowerShell is going to stay relevant. It's something, we went back, and that's what I was doing 10 years ago. I don't know if it quite came out 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. It's something I'm still doing a lot of today, is writing PowerShell scripts to automate certain aspects of SharePoint administration, SharePoint management changes across multiple site collections. There's certain features. For the longest time, hub sites. You could only enable manage hub sites with PowerShell. A new announcement this week was the whole passwordless authentication. That you can only enable right now with PowerShell. So I think PowerShell scripting is going to stay around for quite a while, especially I can see it almost even more so maybe with the cloud. And this is just going to be me speculating, is with the cloud, most of the stuff tends to be in the browser. So your options are really connect via a script to run scripts against a tenant because nobody's ever going to let you have access to the Office 365 server desktop.
Yep.
So it's either automate it with stuff like PowerShell or it's going to be click around in your browser and do it in your browser.
When you find yourself writing PowerShell these days, how often, I'd be curious to get your take on, sometimes you can write the most amazing single line parameterized commandlet versus a PowerShell that's doing some sort of iterative loop. How often are you like the single line commandlet jockey versus the extended script?
The extended script. I am not a single line guy because I want to be able to read my script and understand it later.
Okay.
I do have some that are just a single run. I have done some actually with Azure Automation. So Azure Automation lets you have your runbooks, lets you run PowerShell.
Yep.
I've done whole provisioning solutions around Office 365 groups and teams by leveraging a SharePoint list, Microsoft Flow, that then calls a PowerShell runbook in Azure Automation and goes and spins up an Office 365 group, a SharePoint site, does all of that because then I can use Flow to put an approval workflow in. The SharePoint list makes it nice and easy for site requests, for group requests. I do stuff like that,
Yep.
but then I do have some of those loops where it's like, okay, this content type has to be added to a document library on 100 different site collections. Let's write a PowerShell script to go do that for me automatically.
One of my favorite shows is Silicon Valley. I'm calling up here on this. We're not going to run into the copyright issues by trying to play it on the air, but the classic tension between the IT pro and the developer.
Yep.
Dinesh and Guilfoyle are always fighting over, it's failing because of your crappy code. No, it's failing because of your crappy servers. I think it is fast. Todd Clint, who's another MVP and IT pro, likes to, needle a little bit and say, hey, remember, developers are people too, which I think is relevant, especially given the title of today's episode.
They're not exactly human, but they are people.
But I do think it's neat watching, historic IT pro behaviors have to adapt some of the patterns and practices of like setting arrays and looping and being able to build things that really look a lot like programming, even though it's technically scripting.
Yes. It was I can't remember if it was your podcast or another one I was listening to where they got into that was PowerShell, is it scripting or is it coding? And everybody's like, no, it is not a developer. You're just writing scripts. But you're right. There's a lot of similarities. I actually have I minored in computer science. So I have done a little bit of coding in my past. Some of those similarities, like you said, are really close when you get into some of the PowerShell scripts you write and writing some typical C# code.
Right.
I almost saw you open Visual Studio, so I'm going to ask you to take off that dev hat for a second. And I want to actually put a lie detector on you. This is a virtual lie detector. I know it's just audio only. So now you have to tell the truth. We have certainly a consistent thing that we do. We create the service and we evolve it consistently. And it's evolving. We made a ton of disclosures. We'll make them again at the SPC 19. We're just going to keep doing that and innovating and pushing it out. There's a thing that IT certainly is concerned about, which is change management. So I just want to get your take on, from an IT pro, somebody who's obviously working in the cloud and working with customers who are working in the cloud, how are we doing with change management from an IT perspective? You have the lie detector on, and we like honesty. But we also want to get feedback if you have ideas for things that we could do better, but also hopefully maybe some things that we are getting right.
So I think overall, you guys have done a good job. I think the roadmap has helped a lot. The Office 365 roadmap, where you can go out and see what's in development, what's deploying, what's coming. That part of it really does go well. I actually found an RSS feed the other day that lets me subscribe to all the updates in the roadmap that I found helpful.
Yeah, just shortly before the show, they actually revamped the Office 365 roadmap. I don't know if it's technically now listed as the Microsoft 365 roadmap, but that's what we're working towards.
Okay.
Obviously, no hiding that.
Yeah.
But probably not a surprise that you didn't see it before.
Right. So that's gone well. I think the biggest struggle, and I don't know how this is solved, but obviously Office 365 SharePoint is huge. It is servers upon servers upon servers and multiple data centers. You get announcements of, hey, this item is coming, it's being deployed to first release, and then you wait. And you're like, well, is it going to come to my tenant this week? I have users on first release. How do I communicate to my business when I don't actually know when it's going to hit my tenant?
Yeah, because it's come up a couple of times when we just talk about there's a lot of change, we talk about innovation and whatnot, and sometimes it's just an offhanded comment in terms of us referencing it. And we've had a few of our listeners that are replying back and saying, yeah, we heard you even talking about sort of that, what may be a struggle of change management, or what could possibly Microsoft do better there. And I think you boiled it down that it's just that granularity of, great, you told me a long time ago you're working on it, you disclosed it at the conference, now you've talked about it rolling out, and getting more granular, I think, is the general feedback I hear.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, I know it's not SharePoint related, but like the new Outlook web interface. That one was announced, and it's like you get a preview button, and every day I'm like, no preview button, no preview button. And I waited, and eventually it came like a week or so later, and I'm doing the same thing with the new Microsoft Admin Center. I'm like, I want my preview button up here. And
I just wanted to confirm everyone outside is also now seeing it is the Microsoft 365 roadmap now.
Excellent.
How much do you split your time to stay educated between the roadmap versus, say, Message Center?
I spend most of my time in Message Center.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the Message Center primarily for me because the Message Center is right there. It's something I log into every day. It's something I go to the Office 365 Admin Center every day. The roadmap, if there's that RSS feed, it's nice because it'll pop up in my RSS feed, but I don't even always have time to flip through all of that.
Okay.
I love the Message Center. I think even going back to the whole change management, if that Message Center could be like granularized down to, I know it is there somewhat where the messages are only ones that are relevant to me, to my tenant, but even like a 24 hours of, hey, this feature is going to be lit up in your tenant within 24 hours or 48 hours or something like that. But I go to the Message Center a lot more for that stuff than I do something like the roadmap.
That's good to know. Well, let's imagine a message came into the Message Center that was more about what we're talking about, that evolution of an IT pro on premises, considering being a cloud admin. And certainly they may span both. Hybrid is not something that we have moved away from. That's a very real deal. But I'm going to make up a quote, and I want you to tell me if it's a good quote or not. So this is a Mark Cashman quoting himself, but more of just me trying to understand if this is what I heard, or maybe what we're trying to talk about here.
Okay.
IT will go from managing servers to helping manage the business, moving from IT to business advocate. How much of that second part, getting closer to the business? You told us about all the stuff that you did on the server.
Yep.
Told us about all the things that you manage and maybe now in the cloud that you don't manage. With some of that time, where are you moving? Are you moving closer to helping the business
Yes.
help and solve their problems?
Yep, very much so. And Scott and I have even talked about this too on our podcast a few times, is for me, I think it's kind of exciting because as IT pros, I always love the previews. I love the new flashy features. I love all of that. The business doesn't always love that. And I see our role as an IT pro is really to help the business more. It's like, okay, you guys have teams. Teams has to be managed by an IT pro, but you can't just give it to the business and expect them to figure it out. It's really, like you said, that business advocate, focusing on the business. How can we as IT pros help the business do their job better? The whole requesting a site using the flow, the example I went to earlier, didn't come out of a flashy thing I wanted to do. It was like, okay, as the business, we still need to manage this. We need to give the business an easy way to request a site, but we want to avoid some of that site sprawl that SharePoint admins have seen in the past. So it's leveraging those IT pro skills to build them a nice, easy, hey, this is the way we can request it, but still have approval on it.
So the question I wanted to ask is another common, I think, misperception, but you'll have to tell me if I'm right. This thing, the cloud, I start to use Office 365 and it's ungovernable. I can't manage it. And again, that's using the IT pro hat of the past. I enter in the cloud and now it's just crazy town. I can't do all the things I used to be able to do. How true is that from what a business actually requires from a governance perspective?
I don't think that's true at all. I would flip it the other way. I would say you actually have more control, more governance in the cloud. One thing I like to tell people, and a big credit to Microsoft, is you guys have taken all of your products. When you even start looking at compliance, DLP, the information rights management, some of that type of stuff, you have integrated all of these Microsoft products together in a way that I feel like they were always meant to be integrated together, but nobody could ever achieve in an on-prem environment, which gives you the benefit of some of these other technologies that you maybe didn't have before to help you actually govern and control your data more when it's in the cloud than when it's on-prem.
Nice.
So looking ahead just a month to the upcoming rollout of SharePoint Server 2019, what's the one thing that excites you the most about what we're putting into Server?
Into Server is support for the new OneDrive client.
Okay.
Yep. That OneDrive client is going to be a busy client.
Yes.
It's going to be looking into the cloud on-prem, Teams files, which really are in a document library. Anywhere you have your files, your experience layer is going to be the OneDrive UI, and your take it with you when you need it is going to be the sync client on your desktop.
That, and then I would also say, if I can pick another one, is the modern UI.
Okay.
Again, the old UI, we're in a mobile world. Having that modern UI with the responsive design, that I think is going to be big.
So would you still identify as an IT pro? Because you just picked two huge user productivity questions. You're thinking about the humans or users too.
That is true.
Yes.
Although I, as an IT pro, have to deal with it and they complain that their files aren't syncing.
Yes.
So I think
True.
I think that's where, going back to business analyst and IT pro, I think the IT pros hear about when stuff isn't working for the end user. It's not the developers. It's, hey, I can't get to SharePoint. I can't access it on my mobile device. My files don't sync. And I think that's where it does start to bridge that gap into helping the business users as IT pros.
Ben, you probably get a lot of questions, whether IT on-prem, in the cloud. What's your most frequently asked question?
Most frequently asked that I address is security. Is the cloud secure? My company doesn't want to go to the cloud because of security. I get it a lot. It resolves around security, and people, for some reason, don't feel their data is secure in the cloud.
Before you hop in your car to drive home, we just wanted to say thank you.
Where can our listeners find out more about you online or where you're going to be coming up to events in the community?
Search for Ben Stegink.
Okay.
Stegink. I am the first, a name like that, I'm the first 10 results on Google or Bing or wherever you search. But that's, my website's Ben Stegink, Twitter is Ben Stegink, LinkedIn, Ben Stegink. It is, I just use my name for everything.
Great. We'll put that all in the show notes. If you have anything specific that you want to link to, a recent blog or an offering that you have that you want to highlight, we'll put that in there as well so people can learn more about you and maybe give you a call from this area or from around the world. But thank you for your time. Thanks for everything that you've done here as far as soaking in the information, talking with other people, and giving an interpretation of what you've heard here out to your listeners.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Chris. It was a pleasure to be on.
Thank you. Chris, did you get cornered with any great questions at Ignite that maybe you get frequently and they were frequently asked throughout Ignite?
Frequently asked and frequently answered. I had a fair number of questions from folks who were coming from the SharePoint admin perspective, but looking at Power Apps and Flow, some of our big Biz Apps tools, and saying, well, I don't see a role from the admin center. Does that mean that they're unmanageable? And the answer is, of course, they're managed. They just are managed from a different console that you can get to directly from the waffle, the little tic-tac-toe thing. That's in the upper
some people call it
corner.
the app launcher.
If you go into admin, you'll see that there's a separate section for Power Apps and Flow. And so you can drill in, you can see the history of every Power App that's built in your organization and drill into any flows, check the security, check connections, look at the run histories, reassign permissions to new people who need to take over ownership of one. So lots of tools and capabilities.
So it's a lot of visibility in what's going on, but also control of what they can adjust.
Right.
Well, when I get questions, at least in this space, certainly Bill has been managing the admin stuff for a while, but I used to. So some folks still come to me if they have questions around SharePoint Online administration and what's possible there. But the one that I get most frequently now is the question, can I delegate a specific user or a set of users to help manage SharePoint in Office 365, but not give them the keys to the kingdom where they go and have the ability to manage the entire tenant? Of course, they want to delegate the administration. And initially, our answer, unfortunately, was no, but that was years ago. So still to answer this question is, certainly I think it's more of a top-of-mind perception versus we've read about X and Y in the reality. But our answer now is yes, you can delegate somebody to be the SharePoint Online administrator. And I'm going to put a couple of links in the show notes, and I'll just read out what the links are pointing to because it'll become pretty apparent. But there's a how-to article to assign admin roles in Office 365 for Business. There's another article about how Office 365 administration roles are different. So when you go to assign a role, you assign it to a specific selection choice and what those choices and roles mean. And then, of course, there's a lot of documentation about the SharePoint Online admin role in Office 365 that essentially is a lot of what Bill talked about. So yes, you can delegate. Yes, you should learn the different roles beyond just SharePoint that you can delegate to so that you can have either one person run everything or 20 people run in the way that you want and only manage their environment.
You just reminded me of a meme that was going around 2 years ago.
I didn't mean to do that.
Super geeky SharePoint meme. Do you remember there used to be an ad campaign about the most interesting man in the world who was always adventurous, which somehow got conflated with Mike Fitzmaurice, the most interesting man in SharePoint. And if you've seen him at a conference, he frequently is appearing in a kilt. And I said, when he opens up SharePoint admin in the cloud, he gets central admin.
I like that. I know just even standing close to Mike, which I did before our speaker dinner, I actually felt a little bit cooler. And then he moved away to talk to somebody else and then back to Mark Cashman. But absolutely, lots of people can be delegated to. And if you are Mike Fitzmaurice, you probably are the tenant admin.
Yes.
So, Bill, we know that you get a ton of questions. You shared with us, of course, everything you were doing at Ignite, which is maybe a little bit of a test and a tease of what those questions might be. What is your most frequently asked question these days?
The most frequently asked question, at least for us in the area of SharePoint Spaces, is the ultimate when. When can I start using SharePoint Spaces? So the current status for SharePoint Spaces, to answer that question, is we're in private preview. We've got a number of customers who are already working with us and providing their feedback. And if you're interested in doing the same, you can visit exploresharepointspaces.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, and there's an area to sign up for private preview. And then our next stage will be a public preview. While we don't have a date to announce yet, we're super excited about enabling our customers to immerse themselves in the content that they already have inside of Office 365.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Really, really exciting stuff. I'm amazed the first day we announced it, amazed if I try it myself, and amazed to see people when they try it for themselves for the first time. So thank you for answering your frequently asked question.
Absolutely. It's always great to be in the zone with Mark and Chris on the Intrazone.
Oh, yeah. So we have always a section about articles and apps and best practices and things that we always want to promote to you. This week, I think we've got a killer one. I think we've got one that, I don't know, might require some Cracker Jacks and some hot dogs.
Well, it is fall, and the best time for baseball is October baseball. And my Boston Red Sox, and I do have my hat with me right now.
I can't believe we're letting you do this. Go ahead.
Well, they won against the Yankees the other night, but there was a great article about the final play of the game. The point that they made is that the average third baseman plays 117 feet off home plate. And the Red Sox third baseman, Eduardo Nunez, usually plays at 116. But for whatever reason on this one play, he decided to come 1 foot closer, and the ball was hit straight to him, and he rocketed it over to first. Game-winning play because he just got it there a split second before the runner. If he had been a foot back, that play wouldn't have happened. The game keeps going. Who knows what happens? I do think there's a message in there for technology, actually, which is that the details matter. And when we're looking at things like the fit and finish of a site or the ways that we integrate something, finishing is as important as just starting and getting on the field. And, we bring a lot of tools and technologies out there, and we have an internal practice called craftsmanship. And just making sure as we roll things out that we go back and we fill in the extra details over time, whether it's for documentation or parts of the user experience. And I do think there's a challenge to each of us who's administering our own SharePoint environments to go back and bring that final level of detail to make sure that we can deliver the victory that we need.
Yeah, I'm going to step a foot closer to the microphone and actually tell you the first thing that came to my mind, besides the little bit of the eye roll I may have given you in where is he going with this? But the reality is of actually what Bill shared with us, the adjustments to the UI for admins to force somebody maybe who wasn't comfortable with PowerShell to go learn about a new commandlet, to run it as a new script, to make a communication site or a team site a hub site. It's a bit of a Herculean effort when we're really trying to enable simplicity to the cloud admins. But now, have that be, again, a footstep closer as just a click in the admin center. Saves them a lot of time, streamlines what they're trying to do, and it actually then programmatically is applicable to not just one site, but to many. So hopefully, I think in your analogy, there's a lot of time saving.
And if you look at the article, and we'll post the article in the show notes, it's typical geeky baseball sabermetrics, like when does someone move a foot back on a one-on-one count, if there's a man on all of the different scenarios and all the data, because baseball has a rich set of data. And what's interesting is if we do the same thing in SharePoint Online, because we have massive telemetry from the millions of users who do stuff. And we do look at things like, if we put the button on the left side of the page or the right side of the page, where does it get used more? Where is it more obvious? And to be able to make those continuous adjustments.
All right, so I think hashtag 115 will be trending. And to the races. No, sorry. To the game. Take me out to the ballpark, Chris. To keep up with what's going on, we encourage you to join in a SharePoint Saturday near you. They're free. Let me say that again. They're amazing and they're free. Visit spsevents.org to find an event in your neighborhood. And from the point of when we went live with this episode, there's a bunch of them coming up. October 20th, there's 3, Baltimore, Brussels, Boston, BBB. October 27th, Barcelona, another B, Cincinnati, and Redmond. I know a lot of us will be at the Redmond one because it's close to home. And November 3rd, there's a really interesting one in San Juan where they're going to be doing, of course, a SharePoint Saturday, but they're also doing a lot of giving and good events in terms of people on the event that are doing a lot of stuff for the community.
Yeah, it's great to see, the SharePoint community isn't just connected to the technology, but to the people who we live and work with nearby every day. Later on in November, a bunch of us from here in Redmond are going to be heading over to Copenhagen for the European SharePoint Conference, November 26th to 29th. Jeff Teeper is going to be delivering the keynote. It's always a huge event. It is one of the biggest events that we participate in outside of our own Microsoft events, and we're really looking forward to connecting with the community there. And then back here in much warmer surroundings, in Orlando from December 2nd to 7th, Office and SharePoint Live. We'll put the link in the show notes. It's chaired by our good friend Matt McDermott. 3 days of workshops, 3 days of breakouts, lots of other things happening nearby, especially for professional developers with Visual Studio Live, SQL Server stuff, on top of the usual Microsoft keynote.
Great. So there's always a place to plug in. There's a lot of information throughout the year, and certainly keep tuned into the podcast. We always try to cover what's coming up next after the show airs. So get out there, ask your questions, get trained, and certainly let your voice be heard. We always love feedback, too, at the events. All right, for the SharePoint team, we want to say thank you to Ben Stegink, who spent time with us. I want to say thank you to Chris for spending time with me. I know I drag you into these things, you drag me into them, but thank you all for listening. For the SharePoint team, we want to let you know that you can reach us via email at theintrozone@microsoft.com or via Twitter @mcashman and @cmcnulty2000.
You can find links to all that we've discussed and shared today in our show notes on our podcast page at https://aka.ms/theintrozone.
Thanks so much for listening. We're your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty. This has been The Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet.